My name is Eliud Ngugi, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Being a man means taking responsibility.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're watching us from. This is the All Men Show, the best show in Eastern Central Africa, south of the Sahara and north of Limpopo. I am your friend and your coach, Robert Burale. Well, this is a show for men by men. A show that does not look for perfect men, looks for men who want to be better tomorrow than they are today. Men who have knowledge, men who will guide us in many avenues that can take us through this thing called life. Today is no different. I have a great man, knowledgeable as best as I've ever had. He's none other than Mr. Wakili. I call him Mr. Wakili. His name is Mr. Eliud Ngugi. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Sharp as always. Nashukuru sana. Who is Mr. Eliud?
Eliud is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and also runs a private practice.
All right.
And focuses on family law and commercial law.
Okay.
Yes.
Growing up, did you desire to be a lawyer? Or uligongana nayo?
I wanted to become a doctor growing up. But then I realized later on, I think in high school, that sciences were not my very best subjects. And so my other option was to become a lawyer.
Okay.
Yes.
You have a lawyer in your family?
We don't have any lawyer in their family.
Dad, mom, no, nothing?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Siblings?
Siblings, I'm from a family of 3.
Okay.
I'm the second born.
Right.
Yes.
Sons or
I'm
brothers?
the first son.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a big sister?
It's a big sister, myself, and a younger brother.
Brother.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. You've said clearly you're an advocate of the High Court. You deal with the commercial law and family law?
Yes.
Okay. Are you forced sometimes, and we'll discuss many things, I'm just trying to get my viewers to understand you, all right? Mm-hmm. When you do all these cases, for example, are you sometimes forced to compromise your value system?
To be honest, it's a very narrow path.
Okay.
Not very easy. There are situations which you as a client, mostly, you would come to me and you're in trouble and you need every legal way or method to get you out of trouble.
Right.
And what that requires is that I may have to use maybe my connections, right, to actually get you out of that situation. Other times it may just be, for example, you're being auctioned and we need to get that court order out. I just need to use my interpersonal skills. Right. Which to some people it means that you're not being fair because you're using your interpersonal skills, which maybe I know someone somewhere who is able to help me. Okay. So sometimes, yeah. Other times it just works out.
This is a show for men, Mr. Wakili. I want us to discuss things that men struggle with. And let me start with, for example, divorce cases. And many men have said the law does not favor them. Where there is a divorce, mwanaume ndo anaumia sana. Is that the case based on your experience?
Not really. I believe both parties suffer.
Okay. And in fact, before you go there, what's the process of divorce? Before you are given that decree absolute, what are the causes? And we are not advocating for divorce, but just because it happens, we cannot put our head in the sand. So what is this kind of process? Because it's a tedious one as well.
It's a tedious process. And the process is basically where, for example, marriages are they tend to work sometimes, and other times they fail to work. And according to our Kenyan law, there are 4 grounds that we have that can allow someone to proceed and request for a divorce. And these 4 grounds are either there's cruelty, there's adultery, there's desertion, or their parties are not in what we call irretrievable breakdown of marriage. So maybe communication is not working out, or probably those minor issues that may cause you not to have a smooth marriage. So those are the 4 grounds. And if either your spouse is a man probably you are married to a very cruel wife who abuses you emotionally or even physically, that's a ground for you to actually take up and proceed and seek for a divorce. Your wife maybe walks out and carries everything in your house. You walk in and you find an empty house. That's another thing, and you don't even know where she has disappeared to. So she just left. That's desertion. And the other one is adultery. So if your spouse tends to actually cheat on you, that's a ground. And so those are the 4 grounds. And then once you have that ground, the people who are lucky to even get the evidence, which is basically you come across the communication between your spouse and another man, or cruelty. You have an OB number because you're able to show, or you have been visiting a psychiatrist, so you have something to prove that you've been going through some cruel marriage. So if you have that evidence, then you come to us as lawyers. We prepare the right, we call them a petition, which is basically a prayer. It outlines who you are when you got married, whether you have children, and your prayer asking to be granted a divorce. And so with that document, we file it in court, we attend the hearings, and if there's any evidence, we introduce the evidence, and within the judgment date, you're given 60 days to welcome any other, or rather, you're given 60 days to allow any reconciliation between the two of you, you and the spouse. So that's where the difference between decree nisi and decree absolute takes place. So nisi is once judgment is issued, and then absolute is after the 60 days are over, the court gives you time to actually see whether you have reconciled. If you have not reconciled, it proceeds and declares you as a divorced person.
So the 60 days is mandatory?
It's mandatory, but we have some courts which give you even 30 days.
All right.
Yeah, they give you a period of 30 days to see whether you're able to reconcile or not.
Okay, when you talk about desertion, how long will the court accept the word desertion? You cannot say that your spouse has gone for 6 days and her phone is off, and you call that desertion, can you?
It depends.
Right.
Because you see, you don't just go to court and get your divorce. You have to invite the other party. You have to invite your spouse to also come and defend herself and say whether whatever you are alleging is true. And that's why we have a magistrate or a judge who is able to determine whether your story makes sense.
Right.
So maybe she has deserted you for 6 days, and she comes back with a response or with a reply to these documents that you have filed in court, and she says it's actually not true, and this is why I was actually on holiday with you, or I was actually attending to a conference. And so that's where the magistrate comes and determines and says, I don't think it's true. Your ground does not suffice for me to issue a divorce.
So a magistrate can decide not to give you a divorce?
Yes. That's why you see one of the symbols of justice is a weighing scale.
Right.
Because it depends with which side weighs tips. So that's where the justice comes in, and that's where the magistrate is able to determine and say, okay, I believe what you're saying, and so I will grant you the prayer you are asking for.
Right.
Yes.
How long does a divorce case take?
I'm
sure they're different, but the average.
The average may be between 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
If you are in a not so busy location. So let's say you are filing your divorce in Machakos, or you're filing your divorce in Mandera, which is not a very busy station.
Yes.
So you'll be able to file today, and next week you'll be told, okay, fine, serve this other party. They're actually given 14 days. Once you file, the other person has 14 days to respond. And after if they respond or fail to respond, then you have an option of asking for a hearing date. So depending on the diary, then you'll be issued with a date within maybe 7 days, 14, 21, 30 days. And so if a station is busy, like our Nairobi station is quite busy because of the population around the area, you tend to have a divorce going as long as even 2 years.
Whoa.
And if also the other side, your spouse, visa mention, so if your wife decides to come and put in a response, and maybe there are witnesses, or you have been countersued. So for example, you as a man, you have filed the divorce, and your wife is the one who cheated, and you have also added the people she cheated with on this court case, then they will have to be called upon to come and actually attend this hearing as witnesses. And so if it's such kind of a complex divorce whereby you are able to locate it's John and Peter and James who she was involved with, and you have added them onto this case, it may go as long as 3 years, 4 years.
Right.
Yes.
Wow. And what if you have two people who come to the court and say, you know what, we both want out? What happens in such a situation? Do you still have to go through the 60 days after decree Nisi and all that? Two people, grown-ups, have said, you know what, we are done. Yes, I'm in agreement, we don't want this story.
Well, the law does not allow you to agree to a divorce. So in such a situation whereby the two parties are in agreement, they want to separate, what we tend to agree or advise is that when the man files this case, the woman should not respond. And so there will be judgment given in the absence of the other party. All we need to prove is that she's well aware that you have filed a divorce, and then if you're able to prove that she's aware, and we prove it through filing an affidavit, when you go to court for what we call a registrar certificate, which is basically telling the registrar she's aware, and we are asking you to allow us to proceed in her absence. And then the registrar is convinced by the affidavit saying, we sent physically, she even signed the court papers. And so if she's actually convinced that the other party, the wife, spouse, is aware about this ongoing divorce case, then she's going to proceed on and give you a hearing date where you come to court and narrate the issue, and then you get a judgment date. Right. And the case is done and over within a shorter period of time compared to if she had answered and you had to go through the hearings.
Right.
He says, she said, kind of a hearing.
And based on your experience, and of course you have friends in the legal practice, what is the shortest divorce case you've ever had of, or you've ever dealt with yourself?
6 months. Has been 6 months.
That's the shortest?
That's the shortest. Because of, again, of the backlog in our courts.
Right.
So it takes a longer process. Yeah, you file, if you do not respond, you are able to come back and say they are aware, and so you ask for a hearing date. This hearing date, the diary is most of the time quite busy and full, so you get a date maybe in 30 days or in 45 days.
Right. And
you go for that hearing, and after that hearing, again for the magistrate to issue that judgment and that decree Nisi, it may take another 21 days or 30 days. So you find your 60 days are over, or 90 days are over, or 6 months are over.
Well, this is the All Men Show. We are discussing matters divorce. We'll get deeper. It's not just divorce. We're about to get deeper. This, of course, is a man I call Mr. Wakili, very knowledgeable, Mr. Eliud Ngugi, an advocate of the High Court. This is the All Men Show. See you on the other side of the break. The show is the All Men Show. The station is, of course, Switch TV. The best there is, the best there was, and the best there'll ever be. My guest, Mr. Eliud Ngugi, an advocate of the High Court. We've been talking about Mara's divorce, and you've told us about the process and the 60 days after decree nisi before you're given decree absolute. In cases where there are children involved, and I'll ask you directly, Wakili, does the law favor women in most of those cases? And I'm saying this, I'm sitting from this side, I'm speaking from this side, hearing many men give their stories, especially where there's been a not so amicable divorce. And of course now you have to discuss custody of the child and all that. Does the law really favor the women based on what most men say?
The law does not favor women. It just looks at the best interest of a child.
Right.
And the best interest of a child, for example, who is, we call the child of tender age, who is a child of between 0 to 10 years.
Okay.
This child is preferred or is will be preferred to be with the mother because the mother is able to take care of the child. But there are circumstances which may give or grant a man a chance to have a full custody. And these circumstances are such as if the mother is not in the right mental state, or she's not she's incapacitated, or her morals are not of she doesn't have good morals.
Right.
So such circumstances may warrant a man to actually go to court, and the higher chances of the man getting the full custody of the children, right, who are of the tender years. So a child of 2 years or 5 years. But again, there are instances where the courts have decided that the gender is also of importance when it comes to actually granting custody to either parent. And so if this child is of is a girl, the court will consider having the full custody granted to the man. To the mother, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And at what age, because I think we've seen on TV where kids are brought to the court and almost asked questions where there is a custody battle. What is the age that the law permits for kids to be brought? Because it's very traumatizing, and we've seen very young kids, Wakili, and to me, if you ask me, I think it's very unfair to take some very young kids and put them through that process because it may affect them later in life. So what is the legal age of a child coming and being asked questions so that it will help the magistrate or the judge make a decision in as far as is it the mother, is it the father? Because we've also seen a case, I think not long ago, whereby the children were given to the mother and they actually refused to go. They said, no, we want to go with our father. At what age does the law permit for that to happen?
You see, the courts do not operate in a vacuum. They tend to be aware of the circumstances around.
Okay.
And so when you file documents in court and these documents are not very clear, or you seem to be having an advantage over the other party, maybe because of your financial strength, that you're able to hire lawyers who are able to file as many applications in court, and the other party is not able to get a lawyer. The courts tend to want to hear from the horse's mouth, if I may use that phrase. And that's where they would say, okay, the child is 5 years or 7, they are of an understanding of what they want, or they are aware of the circumstances. That's why the court tends to invite the children to come to court, because the court wants to hear, Toto, unapenda kwenda kwa dadi ama kwa mami? So the court just wants to hear from the child, because the documentation that may be filed may be disadvantageous in the eyes of the court. You may not be able to tell the full story about the current situation. But beyond that, the courts nowadays are emphasizing on getting the children's officers to come and record reports and come to your home and actually interview the child, interview the house help, interview you as a party,
right,
and even see the environment in which the child is going to be raised in. so that they're able to document this in a report and file it in court to bring out the picture. So you may think that hiring a lawyer and being and playing dirty might help, but the court will be able to send a children's officer to record and file a report that will be able to try and paint the picture before it grants custody to either of the parties.
All right.
Yeah.
I know, Wakili, lawyers make money in these circumstances. You as a lawyer, have you ever been at a place where two people come, or have you heard of these cases where two people want to divorce, but when you listen to the story, you're like, you guys, this is something small. Have you ever turned from lawyer to counselor? Knowing very well that if you help them sort it out, your accountant will not be very busy.
Let me speak for myself.
Right.
And from my training, I was trained by, I like giving my flowers to people. I was trained by a very good lawyer called Anne Bogwa.
Okay.
One of the best family lawyers in these countries. And
She's still practicing?
Yeah, she's still practicing.
Okay.
And she's a believer. And one of the things that she would do to her when you visit, and that's what I was taught, is to find out whether these warrants going to court or you can resolve it amicably in your office. And I've found myself in such situations. And let me tell you, it's better when you resolve these issues outside court. There's not much money being made.
To resolve into reconciliation?
Yes, okay. Reconciliation, or even that dissolution, but mostly you cannot enforce a divorce. But it's easier to reconcile parties and not go through the longer process of a court process.
Right.
There's not much money being made in court. Much of the money that I will make is through reconciling the two parties, and the parties are able to actually, they'll be happier and they'll refer more business. Right. And therefore, I'm looking at a brighter future compared to what we'll be getting, the short term, by actually encouraging the parties and trying to, again, which brings me to this one point, that when you have custody issues, you do not have to go fighting in court. You can get a lawyer or a mediator, sit down, record your terms in a document we call a Parental Responsibility Agreement, which brings out the responsibility of, let's say, the father is to pay school fees and that of the mother is to pay rent. And when it comes to university, we shall create a joint account whereby we shall maybe get even funds from this insurer. And so once you meet outside court, we can reduce that into writing, and we don't have to go to court and spend time in there. We can have that in agreement, and as a father and a mother, you can decide to actually follow that.
Right.
So at times we act as mediators, we act as counselors. That's why we call each other counsel, because we give counseling to some of the clients. Yeah.
Wakili, I know you're a believer. Have you ever walked away from a case?
Have I ever walked away from a case? Yes, I have. I have walked away from cases which were going to maybe not, which were against my beliefs.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll not go into any details about that. The one thing that men, in fact, there was a time, I think Nairobi Chapel had a sermon series about doing a will or something like that some time back. It is the one thing most men run away from. Not running away because we are cowards, but sometimes, man, as you're writing a will, you know, it's what you want to be done after you are dead. It's a thing that many people don't want to really face head on. Yet it's a journey all of us are taking. All right? Tell me how important a will is.
Well, a will is a very important document because it helps in planning your estate in your absence. It allows you to express your intention and desires to be followed through. So in your absence, you want to still be in control. That's why it's very important. You do not want probably your car to be driven by someone who is not supposed to be driving your car. And so you are planning for that. You do not, for example, want your children to stay at home rather than be in school because you did not plan or do not give instruction to one of your brothers or to one of your partners to make sure that school fees is paid in a certain way, or these children are taken to this kind of school. So it's a very important document that allows you to plan for your estate in your absence. And so I do not understand when people are scared. I know it's not African for us to discuss death, but we need not be blind to the fact that no one knows how long. We do not know how long we are here. And so it's important to then plan for that future that we may be absent from.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll go into how a will can be challenged, because it can be challenged, right? There's a legal provision for that. I remember we were discussing this in a WhatsApp group with some guys, and one person said, but I don't have anything. Why am I writing a will? And there's this notion that the will is for the extremely wealthy. All right? And many people don't write because of that. For the wealthy, what's the point of writing a will that can be challenged? And sometimes because of corruption, your last will is not respected. That scares very many men out there.
It should not scare them. So for one thing about the will, there is a legal provision that a will must be witnessed properly, and a will should be in a certain kind of a structure. And so if it's witnessed properly, if all the witnesses, who might be maybe your brother, your very close friend, and maybe your lawyer, are there as your witnesses, and they see you write this will, it will be very hard to actually challenge the will, because even after they witness the will, they sign that you have actually given these properties to these individuals, and your lawyer has kept a copy, and your 2 or 3 friends have also kept a copy, then it will be very hard for that to be challenged, because if 2 of them show up in court and say, no, actually this is a real will, and we were present and we saw him actually witness this will and write this will, it will be very hard to actually go contrary to that will. Okay. And so people should not fear recording wills. And the other thing is that what you have mentioned, that wills are meant for the very rich.
Yes, that's a notion.
The notion.
It's a myth out there.
Not really. Even as a bicycle owner and a person with 1 or 2 bank accounts, you need to actually outline how you want your future to be managed. And this is basically could be even how you want to be buried. You don't want people spending fundraising and spending hundreds of thousands or millions of shillings to bury you. You want to express your intention to be buried maybe in a simple jeans and t-shirt, to be buried at, let's say, a cemetery, that and to have a standard of the expenses of this funeral being maybe 10,000 Kenya shillings. That's why you actually record a will, to actually say how some of these things should be done, not just the monetary way or how your assets should be divided, but also even how to be buried, how to manage maybe even the few accounts to make sure that your children are taken care of. So you even appoint trustees to ensure that your children's school fees is managed in a certain way. So it's not just about land and cars and
big houses.
No, it's also about how to ensure that your family is managed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wakili, I've seen movies, and forgive me if I'm going ahead of myself. The people who do video recording, is that allowed for legally in this country? What you'd put in written, for example, you do it on video. And when the parties are called after you're long gone, press play and listen to what the man is saying beyond this life.
In Kenya, we have not gotten there.
Right.
And I think even when we got into the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, I actually did a whole article a full page article in one of the Kenya dailies.
Yes, I saw it.
And part of that, I had done a research whereby I came across information that some states in the US had allowed that kind of recording, that you could prepare your will virtually and have maybe a Skype meeting or some of this, just a virtual meeting with these other parties who are witnessing this will, and you'd record that, and you may be in one of those teams meeting, and after that it could be recorded or taken as a will. That is only being done in some of the states in the US. But locally, our Succession Act of 1981, which has not been amended, does not allow that virtual recording of a will or even the video recording of a will.
Right.
It only provides for written
and
signed in the presence of all the witnesses. So you all have to be in the same room.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm one of those guys sometimes when you think about the will, my heart just skips, not just 1 beat, but 17 beats. Well, let's get deeper into this after the break. This is the Omen Show. I'm here with Mr. Wakili himself, Mr. Eliud Ngugi. I'm Robert Brawley, your coach and your friend. See you on the other side of the break. Asanteni sana, thank you very much. Tunashukuru. This is the Omen Show, your coach and your friend Robert Brawley. Mr. Wakili,
yes.
We're talking about the will, and just before we took a break, for those who have just joined, you have told us it's not provided for the law in this country to do video recording of a will. It has to be written, and there has to be witnesses. To make it cast in the legal stone, how many witnesses are supposed to be there? And should a lawyer be there?
You need a minimum of 2 witnesses.
All right.
There is no requirement as to the maximum number of witnesses you should have. For whether a lawyer has to be there, it's not mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
But as a professional who has gone to school, who has read through the Succession Act,
right,
I understand the structure, I understand some of these things. And so I believe it's wise for you to have a lawyer present to be able to actually draft this document for you. You approve the different provisions, and during now the witnessing, you need to have the person in there so that they can also have a copy in custody. Because who do you expect to break the news to the family if the unforeseen happens? It's actually the lawyer who will be a person of authority to actually show up at that meeting and say, hey, before the deceased passed on, we had sat down on this date with Mr. So-and-so and Miss So-and-so present in that meeting, and there's this document, and he said this, and they were witnesses. So you need such an authority to actually carry out and make sure that you prepare the right documents. I've had situations whereby clients have done maybe a will, and it was just in they missed out some of these legal provisions, and they did the will, and we could not adopt it in court because it could be challenged easily, and so you missed out on an opportunity that maybe would have saved you so much.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll ask you, I'll put you on the spot. Men or women, based on your experience, who writes more wills?
Men do write more wills.
Okay.
Actually, in my profession, in my few years in the profession, I've not prepared any or seen any will by a lady. Men prepare wills.
When they have gone, have you ever seen cases of surprises and wife, second and third, the first wife had no clue.
Yes. And this is why when we are preparing that document, we want to sit down with you, and you need to be as honest as you can. You need to share every tiny detail that you have to make sure that we're able to capture it in that document.
Right.
You also need to maybe even reveal and say, this is why I don't want number 3 or number 5 to inherit a thing. So that when we prepare that document, then we are aware that this is why you are not considering to have this person there.
Right.
Yeah.
But okay, you as a believer, for example, I come to you and I say, okay, fine, this is my will. And when I go, there's a lady somewhere in Kericho. My wife has no clue about that lady. But of course, after I'm long gone, my wife will now have a clue because I've put her in the will. You as a believer, how does that make you feel? For example, I'm just putting you on the spot. I mean, you're like, okay, fine. You know, maybe you meet him and his wife. Oh, hello, madam. Good to see you. But you know there's another madam in Kericho. Do you ever advise your clients, listen, just bring her into the picture before you go?
Yes.
Right.
It's one of my mandates to actually advise the person to do so.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, the person you leave out in that document is likely to be the first person to come to court and challenge
Yes.
whatever distribution you have made to the different parties or families, or to your main family. And so it's important not to leave them out. It is important to make, a friend of mine used to make used to say this, that it's important to make peace before the times of war. So you make peace when there's no war, during the times of when the war has not risen, because when it's time to fight, you never know what kind of weapons these people are going to use against you. Yeah.
From the day you open the will, is there a legal given time before you execute it, in as far as, like you say, if somebody has the 60 days decree nisi to decree absolute, does the law provide for a time frame to allow for anybody to come and contest the will?
Yes, the law does have that provision. And what happens is, again, this is a whole process of testate, succession, or intestate. So testate is where if you pass on and the persons who you have left behind need to be in control of your properties, all they do is testate. The witnesses are going to become executors.
Right.
And so the executors will be going to court to receive authority to make sure that the estate is managed properly. And so whereby you pass on with a will, we prepare documents and attach a copy of the will together with a letter from the chief and your death certificate, and we take it to court. And once we have this filed in court, there's a gazettement that takes place, and the gazette notice, once it's gazetted, what happens is that you're given 90 days. Actually, not 90 days, 6 months for any person to come and object to the distribution or to the appointment of the executors of the will.
6 months.
6 months. So what happens is, the gazette notice is available at the government printers.
Right.
It is notifies every member of this republic about any incidents. If today you Google searched some of the estates or names of people on Google, you're able to see the gazette notices and the people appointed as administrators or as executors of the will. And so after expiry of these 6 months, that's where then the family goes to court and says, okay, so no one has objected, and because they have not objected, we'd like the court to confirm. That's where
Right.
the confirmation of grant comes in, and the executors are allowed to then proceed on to distribute according to the will. And where now there is no will, that's why we call it an intestate, whereby you file a case as a family. You decide, oh, we want the big brother and maybe the younger sister or all the siblings to be the administrators of the estate, and then that is published in the Kenya Gazette, and after those 6 months they all come to court, and the court will ask you, okay, how do you intend to distribute the list of assets that you have listed down? And so the other advantage at this point, because this is in the intestate whereby you didn't have a will,
Right.
and why you didn't have a will, the family members are only able to list assets which they are aware of. But if you had a will, one advantage is that you do not leave out properties which may have been gotten secretly, or which no one else may be aware of. So you ensure that everything that you owned goes to the right hands. Because what happens in this country is, if you do not claim any of the assets, what happens is that there's an authority in this country that takes those assets and they go to the government. It's called the unclaimed assets.
Yes.
And so you do not want that piece of land somewhere deep down in Masai land, or up in some far place in Isiolo or somewhere, to go back to the government. You worked for it.
And your children are suffering.
Your children are suffering. So you need to actually list it down and reveal all this information and say, actually, there is maybe a piece of property that I bought somewhere. You guys may not be aware of. You may be aware of it once I pass on, and I want this property to go to the last born or to the first born.
Right.
Rather than have this situation whereby the family just thinks that you only own this one piece of property, yet you have 10 more properties all over this country that go back to the country, to the government,
Right.
as unclaimed assets. So it is important. That's where the importance of drafting a will comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okili, you've been involved in cases as lawyers. I'm not talking now just you as an individual. Family disputes, divorce, succession, and all those things. So, of course, there are people who love you and hate you in equal measure. We've had cases of lawyers disappearing. Do you ever worry? I mean, sometimes do you ever worry about your own safety because the occupational hazards that come with it?
I think every profession has an occupation hazard. And personally for me, I took an oath to defend. And when I took that oath, it basically meant that I'm going to do what is right. And I believe if I'm doing whatever is right, I ought not to be afraid of anyone. So if I have represented a certain family and they have won a case, or I have done a transaction and the property has gone to this person, as long as I did it in the right way under the law, and that's why, again, I believe our laws are here to protect us. So I know the law is
Yes, I know that one.
is also here to protect me. So I am not afraid of such.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. You're, of course, one of Kenya's brightest and youngest lawyers. Anyway, where do we see you 5 years from now? You've sat here and you've talked about Madam Anbugwa?
Yes.
Yes. So somebody held your hand. Where do you see yourself going forward?
Going forward, I am currently training other lawyers.
Okay.
I'm also I'm mentoring. There's a certain young man I'm working with who is in campus. And I believe if any other young man approaches me, I'm going to work with them and hold their hand.
Right.
And maybe in 5 years' time, probably I may be vying to become the Law Society of Kenya president. But I want to be here. I want to continue practicing the law in the private practice, and to actually make sure that I help as many people as possible. Have an angle of a department in my firm that actually takes care of, helps out by offering free services to people, while the other department offers services which are paid for. Right. And so we'll be taking from this kitty and making sure that we are also helping other people. Okay. So that's where you will find me 5 years from now.
Eliud, the man, busy man, how do you take some time off to clear your mind?
Adventure. I love adventure, and also I'm an adventurous athlete. So I run. I do long runs. So on a Saturday or Sunday morning, you find me doing my 30 or 40 kilometers run.
30 to 40 kilometers.
Yeah, 40 kilometers here and there. I go to the gym. I make sure that I have a community in my gym whereby we try as much as possible and work out together. So that's how I take my time off, and I make sure that I relieve myself from all these kind of pressures. Yeah.
There's a young lawyer watching you. Of course, you said there are others who have the privilege of close proximity to you. But there's one who is watching you right now. What advice would you give, and as we get into the tail end of the show, what advice would you give to a young man, young woman who wants to go into the law practice?
The advice I'll give to that young person is just do the right thing. Just do the right thing. Work at it and give it 100%. It pays off when you focus on a thing and you actually focus on it and give it your very best. It works out, and that's what I believe people notice, and they call you out and say, hey, come help me here and there. Just do the right thing, be excellent in whatever you do, and the rest of the things will follow.
You read a lot as a lawyer?
I read a lot.
Does that come with the legal?
It comes with a assignment or with a job. So you need to be aware of your surrounding. You need to know what's happening here, what's happening internationally, and so you need. It's a learning process. That's why we are called learned friends.
We are sorry. Forgive us.
We are not learned, but we keep on learning every single day.
Right.
Yes.
Well, they're pastors, they're doctors, engineers. These guys are learned friends. But okay, I'll put you on the spot. Sometimes lawyers misbehave in this country. Unatukanana, the LSK, the elections, they never happen smoothly. Why? Yet you're supposed to uphold the law.
The reason why that happens is because we understand our rights. And so, because we understand how the elections are supposed to be carried out, any small issue becomes a big issue.
Right.
And so we will challenge that. We will heckle, although we are not supposed to be heckling each other. And so we are getting better at it. You see a lot of changes in the near future. And this dramas will cease very soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're waiting for that day. His name is Mr. Eliud Ngugi, sharp dresser, an athlete. You do 30, 40 kilometers a week?
100 a week.
100 kilometers a week?
Yeah. 80 to 100.
80 to 100 kilometers a week. Sharp brain, great man, a believer, and a lawyer who is mentoring many other people. In a few years' time, he is thinking of upward mobility in leaps and bounds. Mr. Eliud Ngugi, which town in Kenya do you consider to be the best?
Mombasa.
What is the most interesting thing that you own?
An iPhone.
What is the cunniest lie you've ever told in childhood?
Pass.
One thing you know now that you wish you knew earlier?
That life is fun and amazing.
What's the cheekiest thing you ever did in school?
Pass.
Which Kenyan song inspires you the most?
Pass.
Mandazi or chapati?
Chapati.
One politician you admire the most?
Johnson Sakaja.
One unforgettable lesson that life has taught you?
That hard work pays.
News or sports?
News.
Which team do you support in the English Premier League?
None.
Why not Arsenal? Thank you very much, Mr. Eliud Ngugi. Well, thank you very much for watching. We do hope you've gotten some much needed knowledge on matters divorce, succession, what else have we, writing a will,
Custody.
And custody. Where can we get you if people want to get you?
Just Google my name. Yes. It will come up.
All
You'll
right.
find me.
Okay, just Google Mr. Eliud Ngugi, and you can get in. Is it Ngugi or Ngoge?
Ngugi.
Ngugi. Google Mr. Eliud Ngugi, and his name will come up. Get in touch with him and do business with him. For those of you who want to be mentored, he's available. For those of you who want to jog with him 100 kilometers a week, of course I'm not one of them. He is available. Thank you very much. See you next week. This is the All Men Show, the best in Eastern Central Africa, south of the Sahara, and north of Limpopo. My name, Robert Broale, your coach and your friend.